Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Movie Marquee. Today's showing will be the 2006 sequel to Clerks, Clerks 2. With me today are Ken.
I miss my donkey.
And Ted.
I got to watch movies, fuck with assholes, and hang out with my best friend all day. Can you think of a better way to make a living?
Isn't that pretty much what we do here? And that guy's being awfully forward with that donkey, so I'm continuing the donkey theme.
Interspecies
All right.
erotica, fucko.
Interspecies erotica. Some great lines in this movie indeed. Let's talk about some of these particulars, Ted. What do you got?
Clerks 2 is directed by Kevin Smith. It is a screenplay by Kevin Smith. It was released on July 21st, 2006. It has a running time of 97 minutes. It had a budget of $5 million and had a box office gross of $27 million. Clerks 2 stars Brian O'Halloran as Dante Hicks, Jeff Anderson as Randall Graves, Rosario Dawson as Becky Scott, Trevor Fairman as Elias Grover, Jennifer Schwalbach as Emma Bunting, Jason Mewes as Jay, Kevin Smith as Silent Bob, Jason Lee as Lance Dowds, Zach Knutson as the Sexy Stud, Wanda Sykes as Angry Customer, Earthquake as Angry Customer's husband, Ethan Suplee as the Weed Customer, Ben Affleck as the Gawking Customer, and Kevin Weissman as the Lord of the Rings geek.
Wow, you are really stretching for characters in this movie. The customer, the customer's husband.
Wanda Sykes and Earthquake are awesome. So just
I know they are. Is that what it is on IMDb? Is she noted as the customer?
yes, Angry Customer.
That's funny. All right, what else you got for us, Ted?
For the critic reviews, we'll start with our Rotten Tomatoes. The critic score on Rotten Tomatoes is 63%, so it's just below the certified fresh. But it has a favorable audience score of 84%.
Not bad.
Actually, going through and trying to find negative reviews was kind of hard because most of our major critics really liked the movie. As a sampling here, Bill Zwecker of the Chicago Sun-Times, one of his final statements was, "Okay, Kevin Smith, all is forgiven. Obviously, Jersey Girl was just a silly aberration. You only have not lost your comedic touch. You've taken it to new heights." He gave it 3.5 out of 4. A.O. Scott from the New York Times, "What makes Clerks 2 both winning and somewhat unexpectedly moving is its fidelity to the original Clerks ethics of hanging out, talking trash, and refusing all worldly ambition." He gave it a 3.5 out of 5. Ann Hornaday of the Washington Post said, "Clerks 2 finds Smith up to the profane, raunchy, profoundly humanist mischief of which he alone is the master." Richard Roper from Ebert and Roper, he summed up his entire review in, "I like these characters a lot." And Peter Travers from Rolling Stone said, "All is well with the Clerks world when these stoners take the screen and prove that guys can grow old and stay immature forever." He gave it a 2.5 out of 4. Now, there were, of course, negative reviews of the movie. The first one that I found was Andrea Granval from the Chicago Reader. She said Kevin Smith's sequel to his 1994 indie classic about two aimless New Jersey buddies is as dead end as their jobs. Alexa Weibel of Newsday said the slackers of Clerks have lost their wise-assed flannel-shirted charm in Kevin Smith's feeble attempt to translate his day in the life of 90s cult film into 2006. She gave it a 1 out of 4. Scott Bowles of USA Today, Kevin Smith has grown up even if his films haven't. That might explain why Clerks 2 can't quite decide how old it wants to act. He gave it 2 out of 4. And then, of course, Roger Ebert, he did not care for the movie. He summed up his review as, "It has a more authentic everyday feel than a lot of movies, but it's also very talky and philosophical for a comedy, which would be okay, except the philosophy is kind of shallow."
Another one I'll add to it, Joel Siegel walked out 40 minutes into screening
Joel
the movie.
Siegel's an asshole.
Once he got to the donkey scene, he's like, I'm out of here.
That's it. I'm
And
done.
that's ironic of him.
Some pretty
since
big
Joel,
hitters.
Yeah, since Joel Siegel, he was big on promoting one of Kevin Smith's other movies, and then all of a sudden he does that. It's hard to tell if it was for a show or not, but he was a jerk about the whole thing.
Well, you had some pretty big hitters there like the movie.
Yeah.
I mean,
Even Roger Ebert's technically a negative review, but there were still parts that he still liked about the movie. He didn't outright just hate the movie.
of course, Richard Roper also likes Sausage Party, so I hold that in pretty much the esteem of where we're heading there. But
Yeah, Richard Roper, it took a while for me to get used to him on At the Movies after Gene Siskel passed away. But he really became a really good reviewer. He's one of those guys that I look to now even. If I want to go see a movie that I want advice on, that's who I would go to now.
critics, it's kind of hit or miss,
Yeah.
depending on the type of movie, type of mood. Roper is one that I go to as well, and he's kind of hit or miss when it comes to at least the movies I like. Sometimes I'm like, okay, great, and other times I'm like, what are you talking about? That's a horrible movie.
Yeah.
But whatever. All right.
The way I have done it is I found a critic that kind of meets how I look at movies. That's how I get an impression of what a movie's going to be.
Here's the one thing I will say about the critical reviews that you just read. None of them were complicated or wordy. Did you notice that?
Yeah,
they were
pretty straightforward.
real easy, simple, straightforward to the point.
Yep.
Rare. Most of the ones we do, they're using these big $3 words that can't even spell, let alone say.
Another person that I actually like a whole lot is Christy Lemare. She worked for the Associated Press for quite a while. When they rebooted At the Movies, she was chosen as one of the reviewers when they had the brief reboot a few years ago. And she's really good.
Cool. She didn't give a review of this, though?
No, I couldn't find her review of this.
Well, I can't wait to hear Ken's plot of this one. All you, Ken.
All right, here we go. The plot for Clerks 2. Did you see Clerks 1? There you go. It's not the same plot. Somewhat similar, but not the same plot. 10 years after Clerks 1, Dante opens the Quick Stop convenience store to find that it's on fire! Get a hose. Randall had left the coffee pot on after closing the night before, so of course the place went on fire. And of course he walks in while they're trying to put out the fire. Because the Quick Stop and the adjacent RST video store have been destroyed, Dante and Randall begin working at Moby's fast food restaurant.
Movies.
Movies. Did I say movies?
No, you
Did I
said
say Mobies?
You said Moby's. Moby is not in this movie.
Nobody cared. Nobody showed up to that restaurant anyway.
The Golden Calf. Moby.
All right, let me finish this up. Dante and Randall begin working at Moby's fast food restaurant along with Elias and their manager, Becky. A year later, Dante is planning to move to Florida with his fiancée, Emma, whose father will provide them a home and a car wash for Dante to run. Afraid of losing his best friend, Randall becomes resentful towards Dante and Emma. Jay and Silent Bob follow Dante and Randall and now sell drugs outside of Movies. Although they continue to sell drugs, Jay and Silent Bob have become sober after they were arrested for possession and sent to rehab.
They were not sent in for holding. They were sent in for something of mischief.
Driving the car with the deployed airbags.
He said that, that's why they put them over because of the airbags. But they were possessing. He says
they had something in there. They don't send you to rehab for a deployed airbag.
Yeah, they don't send you to rehab for that. They become devoted Christians after their release. Dante tells Becky that he is worried about dancing at his wedding, so she takes him up to the roof of the restaurant to teach him some moves. When the song ends, Dante, caught up in the moment, confesses his love for Becky, and she reveals that she's preggers. Yay! Dante and Becky had a one-night stand at work a few weeks before. Becky tells Dante to not tell anyone about the baby. However, he tells Randall, and an angered Becky leaves when she finds out. Randall encourages Dante to leave Movies in search for Becky so he can set up a surprise going-away party for him. Randall hires Kinky Kelly and the Sexy Stud, a donkey show with a fog machine for the party. When Dante returns, he mistakes the fog for a fire and calls the fire department. But upon discovering that it is not a fire, proceeds to watch with Randall, Jay, Silent Bob, and Elias. The group discovers that Kinky Kelly is in fact the donkey, while the man who Randall thought to be the pimp is the Sexy Stud. When Becky returns, she admits she too loves Dante. As they kiss, Emma arrives. She throws her engagement ring at Becky, dumps a cake she made for Dante over his head, and knees him in the balls, and angrily walks off. The fire and police department arrive, and Dante, Randall, and Elias, Jay, Silent Bob, and the Sexy Stud are arrested. Although they are informed they will soon be released, Dante blames Randall for ruining his life and expresses his eagerness to start a new life without him, while Randall condemns Dante for his willingness to live his life under the standards of others. During the argument, Randall proposes that they buy the Quick Stop and reopen it themselves. Jay and Silent Bob offer to lend him the money provided they can hang outside the Quick Stop anytime they want without the police being called, and for a second reason that was later discarded. Randall accepts their offer, but Dante is uncertain. Randall emotionally confesses his fear of losing Dante. Moved by Randall's confession, Dante agrees to the proposition, and after he's released, proposes to Becky, who happily accepts. After the Quick Stop and RST Video are rebuilt, Elias applies for a job and is hired at RST Video. In the very last scene, with the store open, Dante tells Randall, "Can you feel it? Today's the first day of the rest of our lives." The color evaporates from the film, and the camera pulls back to reveal a milkmaid from the first movie still going through all the gallons. The end. Thank goodness.
Fade to black.
And cut.
And then I think in the deleted scenes, they get robbed again, right? He gets a bullet in the head. Didn't I see that somewhere? No? Okay, maybe I'm getting my movies confused.
Well, I think that's the
hopeful thinking,
the first one.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's the plot of the movie. Where do you gentlemen want to start with this one? I'm sure you've got some questions.
This is Ted's director, and this is Ted's choice. So why did Ted lead this movie out the first time, and why did he decide to use it this time around?
Yeah, Ted, why?
Okay, when you're approaching Kevin Smith movies, there's essentially 3 tiers of Kevin Smith movies. There's Clerks, Dogma, Chasing Amy, and Mallrats. And those are definitely the 4 top tier movies. Then there's the secondary tier of movies, which would be Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Clerks 2, and definitely the Jay and Silent Bob the reboot. And then there's the other movies.
Okay, I can't believe this. Am I the only person that likes Jersey Girl?
Jersey Girls falls into that other category because it doesn't fit into the universe.
I know, but no one likes Jersey Girl.
No,
I'm the only person.
I actually don't mind Jersey Girl at all. I think there's a lot of really great aspects of Jersey Girl. I think one of the major problems with Jersey Girl was that it got caught up into the Ben Affleck, Jennifer Lopez drama. There
was definitely a lot of tensions on the movie, and it was a high-budget movie, and it didn't do too well, unfortunately.
She only had 30 seconds of screen time.
It didn't matter. It was everything that happened off-screen between Affleck and Lopez that totally caught that movie.
And a lot of people were very happy she only had 30 seconds, and she died.
When Kevin brought them in, it was coming right off the heels of Geely. Nobody saw that coming as far as being that big of a flop. And at that point...
Have you guys ever seen Geely?
I have not.
You've never seen Geely?
No,
Okay, that's your homework. Go see Geely. Just see it.
The problem is Jersey Girl, just the story sucks. Ben Affleck is good in that movie. He's very good in that movie.
So is George Carlin.
And I would say the actors of it is fine, but it's a movie.
A rom-com.
It's a movie about a guy who wants to get back to what he loved doing as a job, and everybody giving him crap for it.
Right.
Which I, to this day, don't understand why a 5-year-old's opinion matters more than the man providing things for his daughter.
Well,
but that's another movie for another time.
Yeah,
that's another podcast.
That's a whole different thing. But there's the third tier. It's everything else. It's Tusk, Red State, and Jersey Girl. It's the stuff that doesn't fit into the View Askew universe.
The Fleetwood Mac album Tusk?
No, it's a horror movie that he made.
I know. Being a smartass.
Clerks 2 would have fallen just out of those top 4 movies because those top 4 movies, that's the core of the Kevin Smith universe. Whereas this falls in line with that, but it's just outside those core 4.
I'll give you that. It's definitely on the lower end of the View Askew universe because of your characters. That's about all I'll give you.
Yeah, there's really only one tie besides, of course, Dante and Randall and Jay and Silent Bob, is they mentioned Julie Dwyer dying, which is a callback. And they did call back to the night after, it was either the night of the funeral or the night of the visitation where they knocked the corpse out of the thing. They did mention that. But those are the
casket,
those are the only 2 mentions of the larger universe that he created in the movie.
Why did you pick the movie, Ted?
It makes me laugh. There's never been a time that I haven't laughed. Now, granted, there are problems, and we'll be pointing those out, and even I have problems with some parts of the movie. Just as a comedy, this is my humor straight up 100%. It's kind of dirty. It has some of the racial politics like a Chris Rock would have had. We'll get into that with the Wanda Sykes. But it always makes me laugh, and it makes me happy.
And I think that's the difference between Clerks 1 and Clerks 2 is it's a dirty movie. Clerks 1 implies things because it's verbally talked about, whereas in Clerks 2, it's shoved down your face. Like, here it is, look at it, look at it. Whereas the first one, you can use your imagination and do whatever it is that you want with it. And I think that makes it's a better movie because of that.
Clerks also got an NC-17 rating for language.
Oh, no, I understand that. And I guess
Before
it's all
they
depending
cut
on what your humor is. So I rather have implied humor than in-your-face humor.
A lot of what makes this funny are the lines. It's not necessarily the in-your-face stuff.
I'll agree with you. The lines are funny.
Yeah.
Yes.
The lines are funny. We were talking about it earlier before the podcast, kind of reviewing some of them, going over them, and we were laughing. We were chuckling. They are funny. The first movie I loved, and maybe because it was simple, maybe it wasn't direct. Obviously, sequels are very hard to do. Most people, especially his fans, they were a little apprehensive that he's doing a sequel. In my opinion, though, the main difference between this movie and Clerks 1, the original, as I was watching this movie felt like it was being forced. The writing was good, but the lines just seemed forced as they were being delivered by the actors. And I just didn't get that. And I got a pretty dirty sense of humor. You know, I can hold up my own with the best of them. But this one, for whatever reason, I mean, I had some chuckles. But as I'm watching this movie from start to finish, and we'll get into some of the details about, you know, some of the specific scenes. But the one thing that I was thinking was this doesn't have that nice flow that the original Clerks had. It felt like it was just being forced down my throat and things were being said just for shock value to be said. It just didn't flow the way the first one did. And I know I'm setting the bar pretty high on the first Clerks movie. Right off the bat, you're going off with a pretty high mark. If you like Clerks, you're going in this movie hoping that it is going to be very similar. And in some ways it is. And obviously the reviews by some of those big hitters really did like the movie, but it just didn't have that flow that I was really, really looking for. What do you think, Ted, Ken?
I actually understand where you're coming from there. And that is one of the complaints of the movie. The original Clerks kind of went from set piece to set piece, and there was a flow to the day. This is not that. There are parts of the movie that are disjointed, and it feels odd. Some of the placement of some of the scenes feels, like you said, forced a little. And I don't know this for a fact. This would be my opinion. I think what could have happened here, you had a lot of funny gags. And this is kind of what happens when a director is given, they've reached that next status where they don't really have that person looking over their shoulder, tapping them on the shoulder going, probably should cut that out, pal.
That would be Harvey Weinstein. Right?
Well,
cut out some lines, baby. Make it a little shorter.
Yeah.
I know one of Ken's big complaints in a movie, Ken has to like the characters,
yes,
right? I didn't like any of the characters in this movie. They all annoyed the hell out of me.
Yes.
Huge thing. I just could not get behind the first Clerks. I know you weren't crazy about some of the characters, Ken, and we bantered back and forth with that one. But I really got behind a lot of the characters in the first movie. I really liked them. In this movie, you're 10 years down the road. You're working at a fast food restaurant, not even managing it, mind you, but just working there. And I just could not get behind these characters. I didn't like them.
I think it's because it's 10 years. If this was 2 years after the first movie, maybe I can buy this a little bit more. Here's the thing. Dante's character is a responsible worker. He's a hard worker. This movie's telling me that in 10 years, the best that he can do right now is basically...
Is you want fries with that.
Yeah, do you want fries with that? He has to marry into a family to get a manager job? That's ridiculous. It's inconceivable. And Randall's character is trying to be the same thing that he was 10 years ago, and it just doesn't work. I almost feel like the actor Jeff, he doesn't have the same grasp on the character that he did before. And he's not an actor. He even says that he's very uncomfortable in doing these films. And here's the other thing I think this movie suffers from. It's the Jay and Silent Bob factor. Jay and Silent Bob got popular with Mallrats and Dogma, and now you have them in Clerks 2, and they're in it more than they should, and they really don't provide anything worthy of being there. There's no helpful lines. Even Kevin Smith says at the end, I got nothing. There's nothing that these characters bring to the table instead of just breaking away from the story that's inside the restaurant. Outside of that, there's really no benefit to them at all. And that's sad because I like Jay and Silent Bob as characters. And I just think now the success of them has ruined it for them in this movie. And then the rest of the characters really don't do anything for me. I kind of like Elias. He's kind of nerdy and weird and stuff like that. But at the same time, he's a little too weird. He's like what people like to make fun of Christians that go to Bible camp.
He's a stereotype if you've ever seen one, right?
Yeah,
it's horrible stereotype.
It's overblown. And then the only thing that is more important than Jesus is the Lord of the Rings. So,
and Transformers.
No, he even says, talk all you want about Jesus, but not the Lord of the Rings, not the Shire or whatever it is. All the characters around it, even the supporting characters, they just don't bring anything. The only person that I think comes unscathed here is Wanda Sykes. Wanda is funny as the customer who is upset with Randall for making racial slurs that he doesn't know are racial slurs. That is kind of funny. I kind of enjoyed that going back and forth, where the husband's like, no, I'll take the free food. And she's like, no, you won't.
Right.
I'm laughing at that. These are the only characters that are good here. Even Ben Affleck gets like a 15-second cameo, and he's just standing in line going, that's disgusting. I'm very disappointed they used Jason Lee in the way they did. I would rather see the Mallrats Jason Lee or the character from Chasing Amy. Anybody but what he played in this film. Because
he was that Earl character from this TV show, it looked like.
Well, yeah, it looked like that was the period of time.
He left the shooting set of This Is Earl.
So he had to have that look to him.
Right,
now,
they
that
wouldn't
makes
allow him to
perfect
cut.
sense.
They wouldn't allow him to cut the mustache off.
Let's change things up slightly here, because as your host, I'm going to admit I made a little bit of a faux pas. We forgot to talk about the first time we saw this movie. Let's throw that in here right now. Let's talk about it, and then we'll continue with it. Ken, first time you saw it.
I actually rented this movie because of the hype of the first Clerks. I kind of knew that there was going to be a part in the movie that was going to freak me out a little bit. But, I'm like, what? It's Clerks. It's an underground success. I'm going to give Clerks 2 another shot. And I rented it. I remember going to the video store, renting it, bringing it home, and I didn't watch it again until this podcast.
For me, I actually saw this one first run in the theater. And I remember how disappointed I was in this movie when I left the theater. But I was one of the few people that were disappointed. The crowd I was in, and it was a full house, they applauded. They actually really, really liked the movie. And we know by the budget and the money it brought in, it was pretty successful. I was just totally let down by it. Just remember that when I saw it. After that, I've seen it maybe once or twice on video, also with the same feeling. Ted, I'm assuming you were probably waiting in line the morning before?
Yeah, we were there opening weekend, my wife and I. And then I bought it the moment it came out on DVD. This is a movie that we watch maybe 1 or 2 times a year. It's always in a constant rotation. We love how funny we think it is. And it's put into our jokes, our personal jokes that we have as a couple. We were huge Kevin Smith fans. There was no reason for us not to be there opening weekend.
We should have your wife as a guest reviewer on this one.
Probably should.
Yeah. You said it was one of her top 5 comedies, right?
That's what she said. This is one of her top 5 comedies. I'm not going to go that far.
I got her movie review over the phone the other night. It was like 10 minutes long. It just kept on going and kept on going.
She connects with a different part of this movie. We'll discuss it. I do want to talk about some of the characters, like what Ken was saying.
Yeah, go ahead. Lead into that. Let's go into some of the characters.
Let's start with Ben Affleck and Jason Lee. I was disappointed with how they used Jason Lee and Ben Affleck as well, because those two guys are integral into the larger Kevin Smith universe. There's 4 characters that they could have brought back, 2 for each, that could have made an appearance here. I do like the Lance Dowd character. I thought that was funny, just not for Jason Lee. But then, here again, this was not supposed to be Jason Lee. It was supposed to be Matt Damon. But Matt Damon was off doing another movie, I think one of the Ocean's movies.
I would have preferred Matt Damon, to be honest with you, especially with Affleck in there, too.
Right, it fits better because you don't have Jason Lee, who is so front and center in the Kevin Smith universe. I mean, he's banky. He's two major characters out of this, and it just gets lost there. Here's one of my biggest problems with the characters of the movie. You're supposed to like and identify with Dante. He's supposed to be more relatable than Randall. Randall's supposed to be your best friend character that everybody has, that friend who's like kind of embarrassing, but he's kind of a jerk sometimes. But you're supposed to identify with Dante. I don't really care for Dante for most of this movie. He comes off
whiny.
Yeah, I hate to use whiny because it's not necessarily whiny. He comes off like he has no balls. And it's not this lack of ambition thing that it was like, the whole stoner thing. He doesn't have the motivation to do anything until he's absolutely pushed. And now people will say, well, that's how he was in Clerks.
More like forced.
Right.
He's forced by the fiance, and he's like, whatever, it gets me out of here.
But
right?
he's a hard worker. He's not like he's lazy. He's a hard worker. He goes by the rules. He tries to represent himself, as he says, not a jerk. He doesn't want to be that guy. He's the opposite of Randall, but for some reason, they're both in the same spot.
But
there's an ambition issue
he
here.
Undercuts himself by always wanting something more. I don't like the whole idea that you have to be the status quo, that you have to meet what society wants, that he's supposed to have the house with the white picket fence, and he's supposed to have the job and all of that. If he defied that, that would make him a more interesting character. But this is the thing with Randall. His character is inconsistent in the movie because he gets 90% of all of the funny stuff. But when he comes forward, and I know Ken said that he feels uncomfortable, I think that there's one part of this movie, he does the best acting in the whole movie. And personally, I feel bad for Randall, because he doesn't know how to tell Dante that he shouldn't be going to Florida.
What scene do you think is the best acting by Randall?
The jail scene?
The jail scene? Seriously?
It's the jail scene, and then it's the montage scene, and just his part of the montage scene while they're doing the Smashing Pumpkins song. I think he shows he's desperate, he's sad, and he doesn't know how to express that to Dante. And I think he's hurt for real that Dante's just willing to throw everything away. The speech that he gives in the jail, I think, is actually one of the more heartfelt parts of the movie, but Dante's done nothing in the whole movie to earn that level of dedication from Randall. And I think that's one of the major parts that hurt it. Ken had also brought up Jay and Silent Bob. Jay and Silent Bob, especially in Clerks, they were the viewer's conduit into the story. They were the mouthpiece for the viewer. I think it's a huge disservice, and I didn't like it when it was time to come for the deep moment that Silent Bob's supposed to bring, and he says, I got nothing. That's where Silent Bob should have been the one to knock their two heads together philosophically and tell them that they needed to get over each other and realize that they're best friends. And he didn't.
That's normally what he would do in prior movies.
Except
his one speaking line, right?
Right. Except we get this meta joke. And it's a meta joke because Jason Mewes says, that's bullshit. You're supposed to be the one that has the deep comment. So it ends up being this meta joke that I don't care for, because this is where it was supposed to get the meaning of that whole scene, and you didn't get it from the one character who's supposed to deliver it. That's my major problem with them. I think their little vignettes are still funny.
Hiding your package, it doesn't make me laugh. It's just like, why? Why do you do that? There's just no reason. And then him asking Dante and Randall to go down on each other while he watches. What's funny about that? None of that is funny to me. And I'm going to add one more thing.
How does he have $50,000?
Well, I think that's from
pot
the
sales.
residuals.
The residuals from the movie.
From the movie.
In
But I'm going to add here about Dante here, because I think Dante's character is so uneven, because we see him at the beginning of the movie and he has another hot lady and that he's going to marry, and he looks like he's in love. He's making out and he seems to be extremely happy, and everybody tries to convince him that this is not true love or whatever the case, but he thinks it's true love. There's nothing that in the beginning of the movie that we see from him that says that he is settling. Then you have his manager, Becky, who's played by Rosario Dawson, who I think she's a really good actress. I've seen her in so many other movies, and I really enjoy her. she does an okay job here. It's just, I don't think this is her type of movie, to be perfectly honest.
Clearly it's not. Totally
think,
out of place, but she looked forward to doing this. She read the script and said, oh, I'm in.
But I do like what Randall says to Dante. He's like, how do you get 2 women each time? Fighting over your ugly butt, basically. And that's the other thing, is Dante has all these things handed to him. And somehow he's still acting like he's a 16-year-old working at the gas station. And there's nothing wrong with these type of jobs. And Dante gives you an idea that he wants more. He's always saying how much he wants more.
Well, in the initial movie, he wanted to go to college, remember?
And he says that they took classes, but because Randall drops out of a class, he's got to drop out of a class. But that almost doesn't sound like his character, because his character sounds responsible enough to go through with the rest of the class.
Right, because instead of doing the potty training, because the toilet seat was up, he pooped his pants. He was supposed to stay in for the long haul. I will say this, that was the one meta joke that did land and is funny, when Randall tells him, how does he always get 2 hot women always going after his ugly ass? That was a meta joke that actually hit, whereas the Jay and Silent Bob meta joke did not work at all. He is settling. The first inkling that you get that he's settling is when Becky pulls into the parking lot and his face lights up. That was not the same reaction as when his fiancée comes in. It's all just in your face, kissy. It's over the top.
But he doesn't have the guts to tell the fiancé, hey, I had an affair and I'm really in love with this girl, because but he feels trapped.
He wants what society tells him that he should want, instead of doing what he's supposed to do. His character is inconsistent, but the part that does hit is I do like Rosario Dawson here. She does as good a job here as just about anybody else could have done here. I believe her as Becky. I actually think she's one of the brighter spots of the whole movie.
I agree. I think she is brighter. Again, I just think that she's almost too good for the part itself.
Well, her character is pretty limited in this movie, let's be honest.
Right.
She didn't have a lot of leeway to expand and, outside of being a manager and a baby mama, if you will.
Well, this is a bromance. It's not a romance. It's a bromance. This is all about Dante and Randall's relationship and how much they love each other, not how much Dante loves Becky. It's about how much Randall and Dante love each other. At the end, it's really about them. You get a little scene there where he proposes at the drive-thru and she slides into the car. Yay, whoop-de-doo.
One of the things that will make this movie fit as far as the storyline of the movie goes is if they follow it up with Clerks 3 that's going to be coming out, and he sticks to the Becky and Dante relationship and how that fits in going forward. That will be the savior of part of that relationship. But with this movie, it is kind of disjointed. You have these funny vignette scenes where Randall makes fun of the Lord of the Rings, and you have all of these are set up. Then the story takes over again. And I think the story gets interrupted too often by the funny vignette scenes.
Which I don't think are as good as the ones that we see in the original Clerks. I don't think like the argument between Lord of the Rings and the Star Wars trilogy is a very good one.
I love it. It's hilarious.
I think it could have been so much better. I think they could have dove into it. All we get is the walk. All they do is walk, walk, and then the second one,
all they did is walk.
Third one, I drop a wing. No, there's a lot of action in that movie. There's just no real argument, Randall's part. In fact, I'm a Star Wars fan over Lord of the Rings by far, and I almost have to agree with the Lord of the Ring geeky guy with his arguments because they were more valid than what Randall was giving. And unfortunately, I just wish Randall was more wittier in this movie when it came to things like Lord of the Rings versus Star Wars. I just wish there was more wit to him. And I think he lacked that. His reactions are funny when he's listening to Elias talk about his relationship with his girlfriend. I like his reactions to that. But what he has coming out of his mouth, it's not as funny. And then, of course, the making fun of the wheelchair guy and saying that he doesn't have a handicap. And then that keeps on mixing Anne Frank and Helen Keller together.
It's funny.
But to me, it's not funny. I think it's lazy.
It seemed forced. It seemed really forced.
It doesn't do anything for me.
I didn't like the guy that was arguing on behalf of the Lord of the Rings.
So I thought he made a better argument.
Mannerisms in that character alone was annoying to me.
At the time, the Star Wars argument that he poses as far as anti-Star Wars was a very valid argument. Now, things have evolved over the course of time, last 14, 15 years.
Movie's 15 years old now.
Yeah, I know, right? And
I mean, you made points about Anakin and Jar Jar, and that's why I think they were winning the argument.
Bad time in Star Wars history.
It was the dark times. I thought it was witty. There were some good vignettes, but the problem is those vignettes don't fit into the larger story. And that's where the Clerks 1 was so good, because you did have those sections that progressed the day, like we had talked about Dante's Circle of Hell, and how the day just progressively got worse. The vignettes here kind of interrupt the story. If you separate the vignettes from the story is kind of touching about two guys. One guy is just blindly leaving his best friend and is really taking a cramp on their entire relationship that just blew up their friendship. I think that's a really interesting story to be done, but it's always interrupted by these set pieces that in themselves are funny, but it hurts the overall flow of their story. That's where the problem comes in. When the story does come to the front and center, when the rubber has to finally meet the road, and Becky tells Dante that she's pregnant, and Dante tells Randall, and they have to come to this emotional climax. The emotional climax of the movie is when Dante goes chasing after Becky, and that's when the Smashing Pumpkins song is playing. And you get these moments for each one of the characters, and you can see the pain. And then it's interrupted by another vignette scene with Kinky Kelly and the Sexy Stud.
Dante looking into, what is he looking to, a restaurant or somebody's house? Isn't that a little bit creepy what he's doing right there?
He's at a stoplight, and the little girl waves at him. Of course, that's Harley Quinn. That's Kevin Smith's daughter.
Which his wife plays
Jennifer Schwalbach, is Kevin Smith's wife. And
she plays Dante's fiance.
Yeah.
I like her better with dark hair, personally.
That's a touching minute as far as Dante goes, because he realizes by looking in there and seeing that family together, that's what he wants. That's when he realizes he's not going to get that with his fiance, and that he can have that family with Becky.
He backs off, they're in jail, and he's already talking about making amends.
This is part of the writing of his character's problem. Always, instead of moving forward, he reverts back. That's part of the problem. The character continually undercuts himself, and that's not an endearing thing.
That's why I'm not looking forward to Clerks 3, because I'm afraid that I'm going to see him in Clerks 3. He hasn't moved forward. His marriage is in trouble, or he never got married. He's a deadbeat dad or something. I just don't trust this character to move forward in these movies, because every time he gets that ha-ha moment, and we're like, good for you, Dante, way to go, he reverts back, and I'm like, you know what? Screw you, Dante. I could care less about you in this movie now.
Do we know anything about the plot of Clerks 3?
No, only that Jeff Anderson is coming back, and so is Rosario Dawson, and so is the guy who played Elias. They're all going to be in there. So,
what about the donkey?
I don't know about the donkey.
I'll admit, I'll go see it when it's out.
Yeah,
I will admit it.
How that does and how the movie proceeds forward is going to affect how ultimately we look back on Clerks 2 as well. Is he going to make Dante finally the fully grown character he could be? Because it is inconsistent here. But I really do like a lot of the serious Randall stuff. I think that really does work. Feel bad for him because he's stuck. He knows who he is, and he's happy being who he is. And he's hurt that Dante doesn't like himself and is always looking for something better. He'll do anything to get that's maybe even not even right for him. He feels bad.
He never does anything until the end here, until he does about the quick stop. Everything up to this point, though, he deters Dante from being more than what he is. And I kind of almost agree with Dante at the end. You always kind of bring him down because he always gives him a hard time, no matter what he wants to do with his life. Another problem I have with Randall. This character is totally different than the original movie. In the first movie, he is ripping on the customers. He's on the phone with the video ordering and stuff like that. We're having fun with Randall. Here, the only time we're having fun with Randall is when he's picking on Elias. Outside of that, the customers are ruling him. He's not having fun with the customers. And that's what I liked about Randall.
Well, that's because Randall was a 20-year-old kid working in a video store. Now he's 31 working in a fast food restaurant. on. The one-liners just don't hit the same way.
But that means that he has to grow up, but he hasn't grown up, and so those jokes and everything are falling more flat. Like you said, they're being forced because there are lines that should be given by somebody who's maybe in their early to mid-20s than somebody who's in the early to mid-30s. It's just unfortunate. And like I said earlier, I think this movie was made too late. I think if this type of movie was made a couple years after the first one, I'm buying it a little bit more. And I know it's a comedy and you're not really supposed to buy into any of this.
I say make the second one in black and white. Follow the craze.
And then, of course, at the end of the movie, it goes from color to black and white because they're back home. And I like the beginning and the ending. I like the beginning where it's on fire and Randall walks into the quick stop like nothing has happened. Like he's not even paying attention. He's just
right.
It's just a regular day for Randall. But then I like at the end where they're fixing up the place, they're getting it all ready. I think it's a really cool moment. I feel something for them at that particular point. But there's just so much crap up until that point that it doesn't save it, which is unfortunate because I think they wrap it up nicely with a nice bow. And I'm sorry, but the donkey sing, it's too much gross out humor for a movie that, especially for a first movie that didn't do that stuff. I mean, for crying out loud, they didn't even show them knocking over the casket in the first movie. That would have been more funny to see than this donkey and this guy giving him a blowjob and then screwing the donkey right after.
You never see it.
There was just... You know what, though? They show him, I gotta finish up, blah, blah, blah. You know, that kind of stuff is just like, ugh. Okay, it's sick. It's not funny, and it makes me want to throw up. If there was just reactions that we see from Jay and Silent Bob and from the others, then maybe I'll be able to get past it. It's a little bit more than I want to handle on this part.
Ooh, cake.
Ooh, cake.
Ooh, cake.
I miss my donkey.
I don't know. I disagree. I think it's pretty funny.
What's funny are the reactions from Jay and Silent Bob and everyone in the audience. That's what's funny.
But the fact that they allowed it to continue.
It lets it go until it's uncomfortable. That's kind of the point of, did you ever see the movie about the joke, The Aristocrats, where all of the different comedians tell the Aristocrats joke?
Yeah.
It's kind of that. How far can you take that joke to make it as uncomfortable as possible before you give the punchline? And that's kind of what this is doing. It's making it uncomfortable. I mean, you don't really see anything. Yeah, the punchline is, ooh, cake. And then the ultimate punchline is, oh, I miss my donkey. That's
we wait for way after.
Right.
And it's so much has happened in between that.
It's not for everybody. And here's where Joel Siegel's an asshole. That's the bottom. That's the bottom line.
This movie.
No,
let's be subjective here.
Because Joel Siegel was hired by either the Weinsteins or somebody to help promote one of Kevin Smith's other movies. It could have been Jersey Girl. And he went out and pumped for Jersey Girl and everything like that. And then behind the scenes was undercutting it and telling people he didn't like it. And then he comes and he does this. He's a jerk for doing what he did. He sold Kevin Smith out, is what he did. He made a scene to make himself the center of attention over the movie. That's not a movie reviewer. That's being a jerk. That's not right. Roger Ebert never did that. None of those critics that we've mentioned have ever done anything like that. It's over the top and it's ridiculous. And
it might be over the top, but that doesn't mean
he's
not right about his review.
He should have been called out on the carpet for it. And he was, by a lot of critics. And what he did was inappropriate. There's a whole list of really good critics that really liked the movie. And I'm picking nits at this. I enjoy this movie as a whole because I can sit down and I can watch it and I can laugh. That's what makes this movie good for me. If we're getting into the details, sometimes the details don't always add up. But for most of the part, the jokes land. He does write good dialogue. All three were laughing our butts off trying to come up with our quotes. So
yes,
these lines,
the lines
in this movie hit.
The one-liners hit, but the in-between stuff does not. And not until the end. Everything in between, the dialogue in between the one-liners are flat. We talked about the scene with Jason Lee, that back and forward. It was all flat.
The reason that it doesn't work is because when you saw Jason Lee come into a Kevin Smith movie, you're thinking you're going to see one of his two main characters. And he's a completely different character, and it doesn't seem like Jason Lee.
It needed to be a character from before. It doesn't even have to be a Jason Lee character, but it had to be somebody that we knew from before. And the fact that they just randomly pick out this guy we've never heard of before.
Right.
And he has this reputation that we've never heard before.
Now we have his backstory from high school, yeah.
But this is what I mean. He's shoving a bunch of things that just doesn't work. The only time I'm really having fun with this movie is when Wanda Sykes is in there. And Wanda Sykes does a great job here. Her lines are funny, and this is the one time where Randall's kind of being funny because he's ignorant to the fact that what he's saying is a racial slur. And then he comes up with later and finds out that his grandma is basically a racist.
Okay.
Yeah, after he starts putting everything together,
this
right?
is the third level of this movie. There are social commentaries, and this is one of them. Another one is the whole idea that they are in, because Rosario Dawson's character, Becky, does refer to it as a Mick job. You have to remember when this movie came out in 2006. This is around the time where there was manipulations in the United States of the unemployment numbers as to make McDonald's jobs into employment numbers. And that's where the whole idea of a Mick job came, because they tried to elevate it above being a fast food job. That was the time. That's why they're in a Mick job. It's funny that they even got away with calling it a Mick job, because that is a social commentary of the time. And that's ultimately, I think that's why they're in the position of a fast food restaurant. The second social commentary is the idea of the racial joke. The whole idea of, well, my grandparents said it, and my grandparents did this, or my parents said this and did this, so therefore it's not wrong. That's the social commentary that he's trying to make here. That yes, it is wrong, regardless. It was wrong then, too. Nobody was able to call him out on it. Now, how he does it is completely hilarious with Randall. And Randall coming to the conclusion that, I think Grandma was probably a racist. That was hilarious.
I'll give you that.
That was hilarious. And Wanda Sykes' character and Earthquake's character are freaking hilarious. They even showed the two different sides of the other side coming from their point of view, of where Earthquake's like, well, he's not calling me that.
Right.
And Wanda Sykes is like, no, that's bullshit. He's a racist. So you see what he did there. He took this argument that people had been excusing this language and the way they speak, turned it on its head, and then gave you both perspectives of the other side of the argument. It's one of the best scenes in the entire movie. It's actually really intelligent. And this is the maddening thing with Kevin Smith. Throughout his entire thing, he will hit these high notes like that. And they're so high, but it's not consistently that.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth.
That's what hurts. When he's at his best, it's out of the park. 100% funny. There's not one moment of that doesn't hit.
Then he craps on it afterwards, and that's the problem with it. I totally agree with you. There's some high notes here. On that scene, I agree with you. I love it. I agree with you on everything you said about that scene. But then he comes with the donkey scene, and people are not remembering that scene with the social commentary in it, with the racism and stuff like that. They don't remember that anymore. They remember the donkey because it's in your face, it's loud and obnoxious. And that's what Kevin Smith wants you to remember when you leave this movie, is that scene, not the scene with Wanda Sykes. That's what this comedy should have been, an intelligent comedy like the first Clerks was. And I wasn't a big fan of the first Clerks. I like it. I don't love it. But this movie is not intelligent. There's nothing intelligent about this movie at all.
There really isn't.
Because every time he says something smart, he then puts crap in his mouth and spits it out on us, the audience.
I disagree with a lot of that. I don't think that he does that at all.
Ken is very passionate there.
I mean,
Screw Kevin Smith.
I understand. I understand that there are parts that are offensive. I don't get offended. I don't live in a world where, as far as my comedy, I don't get offended. If I don't like something,
yeah.
I don't listen to it again. The thing is
not the intelligent comedy that you're hoping that this is.
Not all comedy has to be intelligent.
The first Clerks was intelligent.
The vignettes, a lot of them were smartly done. I will give you that. But not all of them were super intelligent. If he made the entire movie the social commentary of that one scene, nobody would like it. I wouldn't like it, because now you're getting too preachy. By doing it the little that he does, it hits its mark where it's supposed to hit. Not all jokes are going to hit. Not every joke is a home run. What I was getting at, as far as being maddening, is that he takes those funny moments that are so awesome, and he doesn't have that same follow-through with the character development. That's where ultimately the problem lies, because the characters are inconsistent. they're uneven. That's part of the problem. The gross out humor is gross out humor. The reactions of everybody to what's going on is the funniest part of that whole thing. That makes it funny. I grew up listening to George Carlin all the time. Those are the records my dad had. George Carlin was in quite a few of Kevin's movies. I can see that humor, and that's what makes me laugh. And for that, I can overlook and move past a lot of the problems I have with the characters. I think being offended by the donkey show at the end, I think that's not what he's wanting. That's not the whole point of what he's wanting from the movie. He wanted to make a buddy movie and make a commentary. Ultimately, you have to go back to why was this movie made? This movie was made because Jason Mewes almost died. And that was the whole impetus behind making the movie. Kevin Smith told him he would make another Clerks movie if Jason got himself clean. Jason Mewes got himself clean, and the whole connection between Randall and Dante, and when they're talking about friendship and everything like that, that is a direct correlation between Jason and Kevin's relationship. And that's kind of what makes this also very kind of a, I hate to use the word beautiful, but it's a special moment because you know that he's writing that from the heart. And that's another part that Kevin does really well. When he writes from the heart, it works. And when he's trying to fill in the rest of everything, that's where the serious parts fail as far as the characters go.
Yeah, I know that Mewes was just out of rehab. This is the only movie he's done up to date that he was completely clean and sober, right?
He had almost...
Completely clean and sober.
Yeah, he was completely clean. The whole thing of Jay and Silent Bob being clean is 100% truth. Jason almost died a couple of times.
He had a rough lifestyle, man.
Yeah. When Kevin's writing this stuff about friendship, that's where it's coming from. I can feel it.
I can't argue with you there. It's definitely a relationship. It is a bromance, if you will. Mm-hmm. I am happy that Jason Mewes, who I not really like, he's outgrown his character. He's our age now, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's outgrown the character. I mean, seriously, he's done. You can't keep playing that part. And I think if you try and push him into another Clerks 3 doing the exact same thing he's doing now, it is going to fall short.
Well, that's the thing with the reboot and why the reboot, Jay and Silent Bob reboot.
Did not like the reboot.
It was...
Liked it more than this.
Close, but
Jason,
yeah.
The thing that I did like when he realized he has a kid, I like those parts. And here again, if we see advancement of the character, I would like to see them as they grow old and they do mature. Clerks and then 10 years Clerks 2, you were hoping that there would be some maturity and life learning. That's another part where it is disappointing, and I think that's one of the things ultimately that you have a problem with, is that there seems to be no life lessons learned.
Oh, Eric has a problem with it too.
Well, yeah, and you guys both. And I do as well. I wish there would be a little bit more of a life lesson, because that's what life is. We all learn from our experiences. And it just seems like that these guys haven't learned anything from their experiences. Jay and Silent Bob learned from their experiences. They got clean.
Still selling drugs.
They're still selling drugs. They're still doing their thing, but they're clean. They've learned a life lesson. Their characters have moved, have shifted.
In certain senses, I agree with you, like with the drugs, but with the comedy itself, it gets raunchier and raunchier. Like I said earlier.
No, that's not what we're talking about. We've moved on from that particular part of the conversation. These two guys we're talking about have the characters matured. Those two characters had a life lesson that was learned. They gotten themselves in trouble with the law, and now they're clean and sober.
Oh, so I'm okay.
They've lived.
They've done that. Their characters have graduated to manhood.
No, that's character development. We don't see that same character development from Dante, and we see a little bit of it from Randall because he's actually feeling emotion that he never felt in the first movie. We never get the sense that, other than the one time when he looks at the one female character, he says, "If you break his heart, I'll kill you." That's the only time we really see any emotion, one way or another, out of Randall.
They get into a fight in Clerks 1 over
that was because
that.
Dante hit him.
Yeah, but that's because of the emotional cookiness of Randall.
Dante doesn't show any growth here.
I agree. Dante doesn't show any growth here, and for me, that's half the battle for a movie. Is if you got a sequel and it's about certain characters, this is a character film. And when you don't develop your characters, you lose me. This is not like us watching, let's say, Airplane 1 to Airplane 2 or Hot Shots to Hot Shots 2. This is a character those are completely different movies. It's
a completely different movie altogether.
It's a completely different genre of comedy.
What I'm saying here is that this is a character movie that's a comedy.
Okay.
And these characters don't develop. What my problem with Jay and Silent Bob is they're still selling drugs, they're still acting weird, and then they are starting to becoming more gross out humor. They're saying more gross out things, they're doing more gross out things. You know, like I said earlier, he tucks in his package. We don't see that in the other movies, but he does it here. Why? Why does he do it here? Because he can't do drugs, so he has to do something else that's crazy to offset the drugs. And it just tells me that these characters have reverted back because we don't see the difference in him being off of drugs. I'm happy that he got off of drugs, and I'm happy Kevin Smith did something for him to make this type of movie. I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. I don't think he wrote from the heart, at least not for most of his movies. There might have been a scene or two that he did, but in general, I think he just hashed something out for his friend to be in a movie. That's what we got, was a hashed out movie that he did not spend enough time to work on, and we get this. And the more and more I talk about it, the more and more my grade is starting to slide and slide and slide.
Uh-oh, we better end the podcast now.
I think that you're extremely over the top on this. The whole thing with him doing the Silence of the Lambs thing.
Yeah, explain that one, Ted, because I sure as hell can't.
How to put this. When you have a joke with a friend that's an inside joke between the two of you, and then you try to put that joke out for everybody, everybody's not going to get it. And I don't even necessarily get it, because this is something that I guess Jason Mewes has done numerous times to make Kevin Smith laugh. I guess this makes him laugh. And they took a personal joke, inside joke, and put it into the movie. Does it hit? No, probably not. Here again, it's taking one of the most disturbing scenes out of one of the most disturbing movies ever and putting it into a comedy. Kind of funny. It's a weird insertion into the movie. I will give you that 100%. And I don't like the fact that the only relatively funny part of that whole sequence when he does that is when Dante and his fiance run out, and Dante asks, "Is that my gift?" And she yells, "No," because they see him doing the dance. It doesn't really fit. Not all inside jokes are going to translate to the rest of the world. That's not enough to torpedo the movie. It's weird and misplaced. In my opinion, it's a dumb decision to put that in the movie.
I just don't see any benefit of Jay and Silent Bob in the movie. We said this earlier. Give me anything that they did in this movie that really uplifts this movie. Right off the top of my mind, I can't think of any scene except maybe their reactions and what they're saying about what's going to happen with the donkey and stuff like that. Maybe chuckling a little bit. But before that, there's nothing. There's nothing outside. There's nothing inside. Even the bit with the hamburger and the soda where they're drinking and they're like, this tastes like piss and flies. And it didn't even come out as funny. It would have been funnier if they were enjoying it.
It's a topping to a scene that we don't like to begin with because it's weird because it was Jason Lee. The problem with Jay and Silent Bob, like I said before, is they're not a conduit for the audience. They don't say what the audience is thinking. And that's what a lot of what they do in the first movie is what the audience is thinking. They speak for the audience. They don't do that necessarily here.
But the thing is, you're saying this movie was made for Jason, and you don't give Jay and Silent Bob anything good to use in this movie. What's the point of making this movie for Jason?
Well, it wasn't that it was like...
It's not good.
Because Jason
They're not good in it.
Here's the thing. Kevin was moving off and doing other projects. He had moved away from the View Askew universe. And Jay had descended further away from him. This was to bring it back to where they started and to rekindle that. That's what it was. I mean, if he would have made it for him, it would have been the Jay movie.
Which we get in the reboot.
It was to get the character, that he could play the character again. You're taking a shit on a guy doing something for a friend because he has the power to be able to do it. Okay.
Shit because the movie is a piece of shit.
The writing could have been better.
The writing could have been
Jay
better.
And Silent Bob.
The writing could have been better for Jay and Silent Bob. At that point, he had the power and ability to do a movie for his friend. I mean, holy shit, dude.
Well, he didn't have the power and ability to give him better lines, apparently.
I think he doesn't do a good job of making a good movie here. I don't think he spent enough time trying to nurture this movie. I think this movie is done half-ass. I hate to say that. I think it's a rush job. Maybe it's because of what you said, Ted. Maybe it's because Kevin Smith had moved on. The only reason why he did Clerks 2 was for Jason. and he wanted to do something nice for his friend, so he mashed together this Clerks 2 and threw it out there. And I'm sorry, I'm happy that he wanted to do something nice for his friend, but I'm sorry, if it looks and smells like shit, it probably tastes like shit, and this movie is shit.
Wow.
Is that your final review, Ken?
That's garbage. That's a garbage way to look at the movie.
No, it's not.
It is. It's a garbage way to look at the movie. The movie is not nearly as terrible as what you're making it out to be. And I agree that there are parts that don't fit. It can be disjointed. Here, I thought coming into this, the biggest problem you were going to have would be the dance sequence to...
It's actually one of my favorite sequences. It seems like it's an homage to the Blues Brothers.
Come on, I'm glad you brought that up, Ted. What the hell do we need a dance sequence in this movie?
It's just one of those random things that I don't know why it fits there.
Blues Brothers is a musical comedy.
Yeah,
okay, that I can understand. Yeah, that damn. I'm like, what the hell is a dance scene
it's
doing
odd.
in a Kevin Smith movie?
It's odd,
weird.
But it's actually well choreographed.
I don't care.
I'm okay with it a little bit.
I honestly,
it's so
well choreographed.
It's one of those things that's so weird that's endearing.
How about the Christian stereotypes, Ken? I thought that would have been high on your
list.
list.
It's up there.
Well, the major thing that I thought was going to be the major point of contention would have been the fact that it's the last day, and nobody's had anything to say to Dante before this last day. Everything happens on the last day. That's a little bit of a contrivance that I didn't really care for either.
That's because the movie was poorly written.
And it's like jamming everything together. I don't necessarily care for that. I mean, to sit there and take a gigantic shit on the entire movie.
If I don't like it, I think I have the right to.
Yeah,
you guys
come on.
Went after Assassins, and you went after Maverick for unnecessary reasons for not liking that one because of the cameos. You were upset because there was cameos, and for heaven forbid,
cameos.
A director
wasn't upset
cameos if he never had cameos before. You took a shit on mine. Here I am. Payback. Thank you very much.
And
is this personal, Ken?
Yeah,
it's not personal. Even before we started doing this, when we talked about Clerks back last year, I said, not Clerks 2. This was way before Maverick or any of the movies that I did. I just don't like Clerks 2. It's not a good movie. The characters are not likable. And if the characters are not likable for me, then everything else that he does wrong is going to be magnified. You might be right that maybe I'm overblowing this, but it starts off with the characters. And if the characters make it bad for me, then everything else that's bad in this movie is going to be even worse because of the characters.
You're taking a driver to the movie just to take a driver to it. Yeah, there are parts that don't work, but you're just saying that the entire movie's just a piece of shit. He should have never fucking made the entire thing. It's not. You laughed your ass off at parts of the movie. We laughed our asses off talking about the lines.
There's worse sequels than this. Dumb and Dumber 2 is a much worse sequel than this
I could come up with a bunch of sequels that are worse than this.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is the worst movie ever made. I am just saying that this movie is not good. It's not a good movie. I've given every movie that both of you have thrown at me a chance. If I've never seen it or didn't like it originally, I've actually come around on those type of movies. This is one movie where I just can't come around because I can't get invested in Dante. And Dante is the centerpiece of the whole movie. And if Dante doesn't work for me, how is everything else supposed to work? And I'm sorry that you think and that I'm just trying to bring it down as far as I can bring it down. I've said there's some things I like. The beginning and the ending. I told you the ending is kind of sweet. I like it that they own a shop together. I got you two guys, two of my best friends out here, doing a podcast. I love that. I think that's awesome. And I see that at the end of this movie with these two characters. But I don't like these two characters. So
I don't like the ending. I think the ending is stupid. I think the ending is pointless and worthless and really just tied together loosely and conveniently. Jay's got $50,000. So he can lend it to them.
They have the money because it was established in Chasing Amy and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back that they got licensing money from the Blunt Man and Chronic comic.
Yeah. And as financially responsible as those two gentlemen are, I'm sure they have it, collecting interest in the bank.
They don't care about money, though.
They did have the cross-country road trip to Illinois for Dogma because they were looking for Sherwin, Illinois. That's how they ended up there. Yeah, they've spent some money, but yeah, these two characters are not motivated.
If you would have taken some of the best parts of the reboot, which I think are kind of like the Ben Affleck scene where he's a daddy and he's all grown up. I like that scene. And you take the scene where they see Brody at the comic book shop.
I like that too.
And it's fun. I like the nostalgia of that scene.
Where we revisit those characters.
If you take those type of scenes, and
we don't have that here.
And I think that's what lacks. If you had a little bit of that in here, it could have elevated it a little bit more. But again, it still comes back down to, do you like Dante? If you like Dante, then you should like this movie. If you don't like Dante, I don't see how you can like this movie.
Like I said, I have problems with the character throughout the movie. There's a lot that I don't necessarily care for the decisions that they made for him in this movie. But ultimately, I think that he ends up getting to the right spot. He's finally with the right person. And I think it's a happy ending for Dante. He's with his friend. They now own a business. And he's got the woman that he's always wanted to be with. I think it's actually a pretty good ending. I think it's fitting that they end up owning the Quick Stop. I mean,
I do too. I just don't like the way they went to it. I think it was thrown together.
I liked the soundtrack to this movie a
lot. Yes,
soundtrack
is very good. I'll give you.
You got some music rights. Yeah, it's a good soundtrack.
I loved the use of the Smashing
There
Pumpkins.
we go. We can agree on something. Good soundtrack. Except for that crap that Jay is listening to on the boombox.
King Diamond?
He dances to. No, that weird, funky... That's not King Diamond, is it? That weird kind of is like, ooh.
That's the song that Buffalo Bill dances
I know.
to from
But the fact that
Silence of
he
the Lambs.
likes it is a little creepy.
Well, yeah. It is.
Why is Buffalo Bill? Why is that so poignant in this movie?
Here again, it goes back to an inside joke that...
Joke. That's
land.
wonderful. All right.
But as far as the soundtrack really hits, I love the use of the Collective Soul song.
Yeah, the soundtrack is great. I would agree. The soundtrack hits home. It's a winner. He got some good music rights on it. All right, we can all agree on that.
And this was the first time ever that King Diamond allowed his music to be used in a movie.
King Diamond.
I actually saw him in concert. That was a trip. I still am trying to know what I thought of that. It was interesting, to say the least.
All right. Big Clerks fan. Big Kevin Smith fan. Right off the bat. No question there. Saw this movie in the theater like we talked. I was disappointed. Disappointed for many reasons throughout my many viewings of this movie over the past years. Can't relate to the characters. Don't like the characters. Don't like the plot. Don't like the way some of these characters are placed in the movies. I think it's got some funny lines. I think the writing is rushed. I think he could have wrote a much better movie. And I know he didn't rush this. I know he took time on it, but it feels rushed. It feels just put together for the sake of putting the things together. The lines delivered, they don't hit home. I don't think they're funny. I'll be honest. My chuckling through this movie, and chuckling is about as far as I got. There were no laugh out loud, belly laughs, if you will. It was chuckling. There's some funny stuff in it. But overall, the movie is flat. And yes, I admit my bias. I'm comparing this to Clerks 1. Clerks 1 set a bar, and that bar was pretty high. And most sequels, short of The Godfather 2, and I'll even throw Airplane 2. I love Airplane 2. They don't hit it. They don't go there. And this movie, unfortunately, hits this. I'll be honest, if I never see this movie again, it's no skin off my back. Funny thing is, I'll let you guys on inside joke. I bought this movie initially when Blockbuster was going out of business and they were selling everything. Buy all their DVDs, $2 a piece, whatever. I threw it in there. I watched it. I actually donated this movie either to Goodwill or the library. It was that bad. I couldn't want to keep it in my repertoire of DVDs. For this one, you get a few funny lines, but overall it's a bust. It's a D. A solid D as in dork. Ken, what do you got for me?
I feel like I'm switching places with Ted and saying your review is pretty much on par with what I'm saying here. I don't like the characters here. I do like the one-liners. They do make me chuckle. I don't full out laugh. I like a comedy where I can laugh for about 15 seconds. Not something that I chuckle for 1 or 2 seconds and then move on. And unfortunately, it's this movie. Sometimes I don't get a story where he's with this beautiful woman and the only flaw she had was that she decided to get the invitations already out there because, let's face it, Dante would have screwed it all up because Dante has no ambition in his life. So she does have to take over. You're not going to tell me that Becky, when he gets married, she's not going to have to do most of the work because Dante's probably going to be hanging out with Randall and probably going to be slacking off on the wedding and anything else in the life. Probably in the third movie, they're probably going to be talking about his lack of being a good father because he's hanging out with Randall all the time. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the next movie.
Or the funny thing, he probably has a teenager who's just like him
Or it's just
when he was that
him.
age.
Can't make a decision to save his life.
Mm-hmm.
It's very possible. Like the scene with Wanda Sykes saves this from being enough. Yes, I'm not giving it enough. I think those scenes, when we see them, I enjoy them, but they're very far and few between. And the other reason why I'm not giving this enough is because there are worse sequels than this than I saw. I already mentioned Dumb and Dumber 2 as a sequel that I've seen that is even worse than this. And if I'm
I think we saw it in the theater.
And I saw that in the theater.
With you?
With you and my son and my father-in-law. And I was so embarrassed that was the movie I picked for us to go see.
I dodged that bullet.
Yes, you did.
It's a good move, man. Good move.
Yes. But this movie for me is also a D. I was close to giving it a D minus. So it's still kind of almost in that realm, but I'm going to lean on D because there are some times that I chuckle. I do laugh at some of the Randall's jokes, even though they're not as sharp as they were in the original Clerks. I'm not looking forward to Clerks 3. I'm hoping for it to be good. I'm actually a fan of Kevin Smith. Even though I have fun giving Ted a hard time about Kevin Smith, I like his rags to riches story. I like that he gives back to his friends and that they do these things together. And if I had that talent to make movies, I would want my friends to be part of it too. So I too am
looking forward to Clerks 3.
So I do root for Kevin Smith. I just don't know if I believe in Kevin Smith anymore. And I think Clerks 2 sums it up in a whole of what I think Kevin Smith unfortunately is now. And I'm hoping he proves me wrong with Clerks 3 and Mallrats 2, but we'll wait and see. But that's my review.
Bring us home, Ted.
I mean, this is kind of what I had expected going into this, if we're going to be perfectly honest. As far as sequels go, it falls really right in the middle of sequels. Sequels are usually either completely trash, which most sequels are, or they're really good in the very few circumstances that they are. This falls in a very odd category for me and is in the middle of sequels. Ken mentioned Dumb and Dumber 2, but the most unforgivable sequel in the history of sequels is Caddyshack 2. It's an abomination.
Oh, well played. That was horrible.
As to take from Clerks 2, Caddyshack 2 is an affront to God. God should have smote that movie and struck it down as the abomination that it is. As far as Clerks 2 goes for me, I do like Randall here. I think that the characters are inconsistent. There are reasons to like the characters. Would I have liked to have seen more movement of the characters as far as life lessons learned? Yes, I would have liked to have seen that. I do like the introduction of the Becky character. I think Ken had mentioned that she's going to do things for him. The difference between Becky and Dante's fiancé at the beginning of the movie, his fiancé at the beginning of the movie is condescending. She's forcing him to do things that aren't necessarily things that he wants to do. She's controlling him. And Dante's an easily controlled person. Let's be perfectly honest. And he does have some ambition to get out of what he wants to do. Becky will do things as more of a partner for him. And I think that's what makes her character endearing to Dante. One of the problems I have with the movie is that it is disjointed. It is Clerks meets kind of a romantic comedy, and it doesn't always hit. I love most of the vignettes. The Wanda Sykes sequence with them is absolutely brilliant. Some of the others don't hit. I don't care for the Lance Dowd section. Lance Dowd was played by Jason Lee. I don't like the way that they used Ben Affleck just as an annoyed customer. That cameo could have been so much more. But I think that's what we've come to expect so much more from Kevin Smith. It's guilty of high expectations. When it doesn't meet the high expectations, it really sullies people's view of the movie. I think that the story is endearing, especially at the end. And while I do have problems with it, I enjoy it. It makes me laugh. I laugh heartily. I feel relatively happy at the end of the movie because I like the way it ends. I like the fact that they're together and that they're running the quick stop. It's a complicated movie for me because two of my best friends, they absolutely hate it, like you just heard. But I do like it. And for me, it's a solid B-. The reason that it's a B- is because there are parts that I don't necessarily think that fit. But as far as the rest of the movie is, I enjoy it. I've only usually watched this movie with my wife. I've never watched it with a group of people. I wonder how many people would just laugh at the movie as a group because there's funny parts and then not pay attention to the rest of the movie. I think that's a distinct possibility as well. But that's where I fall with this movie. I enjoy it. It's definitely not Kevin Smith's best. But do we ever really think we're going to get that height ever again? I don't know. He's now created a podcast universe that's one of the most successful podcasting universes in this medium that we're partaking in.
More popular than us?
Oh, I know, right? It's hard to believe. And he had the show Comic Book Men on AMC for a while. He's reached another level as far as movies go now. He's
evolved.
Yeah.
He's evolved into different mediums, which any
Right.
good director, actor, producer, radio personality is going to evolve into different mediums to stay current. You have to.
I like him. I'm invested, maybe not in him as the director anymore, but I'm invested in Kevin Smith, the person. And I am extremely excited for Clerks 3 to see what he does.
I am too.
There are parts of the reboot I really did like. I liked him catching up with the characters that I loved. He created, in those first 4 movies that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, he created some of the best characters I've ever seen. And I enjoy those characters. And I liked him going back in the reboot and catching up with those characters and seeing where they are. And there are some very good parts of that movie where he catches up with the characters and to see how they've evolved. But here again, in the reboot, we don't see Dante and Randall. Maybe that's kind of telling.
B
the result of
minus?
this movie.
That's fair. I really thought you were going to go higher. I really did. All right, B minus it is. So there
and
you have
I
it.
tossed
folks.
around C. I tossed it around very highly.
I would have been really surprised if you went with like a C or a C plus, especially the way you were duking it out with Ken. Hell, I thought you were going to go A minus.
I don't want to take a driver to something because it's just there to be able to just knock it out of the park.
I don't think Ken and I were taking a driver
No.
to it. I think this is just not a great movie. And overall, from A to Z in the movie, it just does not flow well. Let's just take the fact that it's a sequel off the table. Just lose it. Just look at it on its own merits as a standalone movie. It's not good.
It's disjointed. And
Disjointed. Very good way of describing it.
If you didn't have those characters established already, it would have been an absolute train wreck.
If you just watch this movie without knowing any of the Kevin Smith background,
Right.
and you just watched it, the only thing, like Ken said, the only thing you're going to remember is, what is it, animal erotica?
It's
Interspecies erotica.
interspecies erotica.
Some great one-liners in the movie. We can't argue that. You're just going to remember all the weird, totally in-your-face stuff.
And we
You're
were
not
very
gonna be
careful in this, not to mention some of the words that were very racial sensitive.
Very
We
racial sensitive.
were very careful, so if you wanted to hear those things, then go ahead and watch the movie. We just didn't feel comfortable with saying any of those words, but they are funny in the movie. It is funny that Randall tries to take it back.
Randall really believes that it's not a racial slur, and he doesn't understand why. And that was funny. He doesn't understand why everyone is so upset.
He has blind ambition. We'll put it that way.
But again, okay, a early 30-year-old person should know that.
Yes.
Oh, yes,
If this
definitely.
is a 17, 18, 20-year-old.
Because he's supposed to be very intelligent.
Very intelligent. He relied too much on his grandmother, unfortunately.
I know people who...
I do too.
He loved his Meemaw.
He loved his Meemaw. So we're wrapping this one up here. We've all given our reviews. We're across the board on it. Obviously, me and Ken, not fond of it. Ted
Fond
gave it,
of it.
I think, an overall positive. Fond of it. What's our next adventure here?
So the next movie we'll be doing will be the 1989 release, Say Anything, directed by Cameron Crowe.
All right. That's going to be a great review. Looking forward to doing that one. Ted, where can they find us on the World Wide Web?
On Twitter, we can be found at the movie_marquee with 2 E's. And whatever platform you're listening to us on, if you hit the like button or subscribe button, that will help us greatly and get maybe some more ears on us. We just passed the 1,500 download mark, which is very encouraging. It will help us get seen by more people. And then if you rate and review, you don't have to put anything deeper philosophical about the podcast, just a 5-star rating and a review. Write what your favorite movie is. That also helps us get some more recognition from whatever platform you're listening to us on.
Very cool. And what are they saying about us on Facebook again?
Okay, well, on Facebook, you can reach us at the Movie Marquee with 2 E's as well. We have a nice little community. I actually got to talk to one of our listeners, Chad. Well, we've mentioned Chad before. Chad had an interesting take on what I thought about Full Metal Jacket. We mentioned that in the previous episode.
I believe he's a former Marine.
Yeah, I believe he is.
Yes.
Talking to him today, we just had really good discussion about the Movie Marquee, and he actually shared the Movie Marquee with a coworker of his. I was very happy that he did. So what we would love you to do as well is sharing our episodes with other people. There is a share button. You can click on share and send it to your friend. Or send it to your enemy. Maybe they would like it. We don't get paid. We don't make money. We haven't asked for donations. We do this because we like to do it. The more and more we see people enjoying what we're doing here, it makes us even more excited to do it. So
Ken sounds like a televangelist.
I know. Praise the Marquee.
Praise the podcast. Praise the podcast.
And Ken is playing Jim Baker today.
That's right.
And the role of Tammy Baker is played by...
by Ted.
Oh, wow.
He's got the makeup.
I don't know if I could do that, the makeup that well.
We've done this for a little over a year, 1,500 downloads. It's very much appreciated. Each time we reach a mark like that, puts a smile on our face and gets us energized to do another one.
Very true.
Very cool. Stay tuned, everyone. We're going to be doing Say Anything next. Appreciate you all listening, and we'll see you at the movies.
See you at the movies.
See you next time at the Movie Marquee.